Hi, this is Stephen Beschloss with America, America.
And I'm Mark Jacob with the Stop the Presses newsletter.
And this is On Target. This week we're going to talk about an article published by ProPublica that's looking at what they refer to as the war on measurement and the amount of data that's being lost throughout the administration, specifically as a result of the activities of this, Elon Musk sort of Doge, so-called government efficiency activity, and of course it's part of the larger intention and trend of this administration to make it harder for Americans and decision makers to know about what's actually happening. I'm going to read just their subtitle for the piece because I think it pretty well sums it up. By slashing teams that gather critical data, the administration has left the federal government with no way of understanding if policies are working and created a black hole of information whose consequences could ripple out for decades.
You know,
What?
Stephen, so it's all kinds of data that is being ignored and in effect a lot being allowed to die with consequences that we may feel for decades to come.
Yep.
For example, like tracking substance abuse trends, and mental health trends. That these are these longitudinal studies that if you don't do them for 5 years, you kind of ruin them.
Right.
And these are things that American policymakers need to make decisions on. If you don't know, what substance abuse problems there are, how are you going to fix them?
So the Environmental Protection Agency's data on greenhouse gas emissions, that's one. That's
Yeah,
today, Earth Day, where making it harder for Americans to know about who's polluting and how much they're polluting. Homeland Security, immigration and deportation data, making it harder for us to know exactly how many and with what statistical level of damage. Education and student performance data, health and services, maternal morbidity data. All of this represents, and this is not new. This represents the intention of this regime. Not only to make it harder for decision makers to make evidence based decisions, but also to make it harder for the public to know what they're doing. And
right.
this was a warning, surely by me, I'm pretty sure by you, before we got to this period, that once these folks took over, they were going to do what they could, as they've been doing, which is to degrade the public's capacity to know what's true or not true, what's right or what's wrong, and here we are, and the impact of that, it strengthens the authoritarian regime, and it weakens the ability of the public to push back.
Right. And some of it just seems to be we're going to save money by not, tracking drug abuse so we can lay off 17 people. It could be like that. But some of it seems pretty nefarious. Like when the EPA is going to tell oil refineries, well, you don't need to tell us, what kind of emissions you're doing. That's okay. Just, keep that information to yourself or don't even collect the information. That seems to be part of this trend of the Trump administration deciding to just take the gloves off and just let industries pollute as much as they want.
Yeah,
And
and honestly, let's be clear. I mean, we can go back really a number of years. The decline in policymakers making evidence-based policy decisions has been on a decline for years and years. Rather than doing these studies, rather than having really reliable statistics as a basis for policy decisions, more and more over these years they've become politicized, and so it didn't just start now, but the acceleration of this, the intensification of this, the eradication of information, that allows us to understand our world, and that couldn't be more fundamental in our ability as citizens of a democracy to understand our government and to understand, how we actually do that most important thing, which is engage in self governance.
right, and if hard facts are no longer available, then we have to rely on opinions, and we get that, and so every opinion is equal, and therefore their kooky opinions are equal to the ones that science comes up with, and so it's really been kind of this attack and assault on information in order to allow them to lie more effectively,
Yeah,
and
and look, the problem is now, but even when we get through this regime, and we will, but when we do, the amount of work that's going to be required to rebuild, and that's that's both the processes themselves and also to deal with the gaps in the knowledge that make those longitudinal studies more less reliable.
yeah, yeah. Well, so there's going to be a lot of work ahead, and I'm glad to hear you be optimistic about our our ability to recover from this.
Well,
But it's going to be tough.
it is. I mean, look, I'll tell you where ProPublica ends their piece. It's this: who knows if the country will be able to rebuild that measurement capacity in the future? For now, the loss is incalculable.
Yeah, well, that says
That's
it very well.
yeah, that's tough news, but I think it's important to know what we're facing.
Yeah. Talk to you next time, Stephen.
Thanks, Mark.